The Linguaverse Episode 18, The Economics of Words Language as Currency, Arc 2. The Future and Philosophy of Language. Welcome back to the Linguaverse. If you've been walking this path with me since the first arc, you'll know that every episode has carried one simple truth beneath its surface. Language is never free. Every word we speak carries a cost, a consequence, a ripple. But here in Episode 18, The Economics of Words, Language as Currency, we're going to look more closely at that cost. Because the question before us isn't simply what do words mean, but what are they worth? We've come a long way to get here. In The Future of the Spell, we explored how speech can enchant, persuade, and bind, how words act like spells, altering perception and bending reality. In Language and Reality, we saw how entire worlds are sustained through shared agreement, how societies collectively buy into systems of meaning. Now, we turn toward the marketplace, a world where language itself is the medium of exchange, where meaning is traded like stock, and attention is the new gold standard. Words for sale, this isn't just a metaphor. In the 21st century, words quite literally generate wealth. A viral headline can move markets. A single tweet can crash reputations. A slogan can transform a product from commodity to cult. Our linguistic ecosystem has become an economic one. And we, speakers, writers, listeners, readers, are all investors, traders, and sometimes the traded. There's a saying in economics: if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. In the age of social media, we might say, if you're not aware of the spell, you are the spell. Because every like, every comment, every retweet, every hashtag is a microtransaction in the marketplace of attention. We spend our focus like coins, we bid for belonging, we hoard recognition. But what's remarkable is that this isn't entirely new. The economy of language is as old as speech itself. In the beginning, words were not for profit, but for promise. To give your word was a pledge, a moral contract. To break it was to go bankrupt in honor. Over centuries, those promises became systems, contracts, oaths, laws. Language acquired legal and financial weight. Eventually, the spoken promise evolved into the written brand, and the sacred word into the advertising slogan. The sacred vow became the tagline. The oath became the offer. The chant became the jingle. What we're living in now, this marketplace of words, is not a corruption of language, but an acceleration of its ancient power. Words have always built economies. Only now have those economies become invisible, algorithmic, global, and immediate. When I began writing the Inversiverse, I thought I was exploring philosophy and psychology, the unseen architecture of mind and manipulation. But the more I studied, the more I realized I was also tracing a hidden economy, how human attention is mined, refined, and sold through language. Every slogan, every soundbite, every diagnosis, every meme, they all circulate like currency, shaping what is valued and what is ignored. It's astonishing, really. The same linguistic tools that once allowed tribes to coordinate survival now allow corporations to capture minds. And most of us, without realizing, have been spending our words recklessly, buying into narratives, investing in illusions, mortgaging our attention to the highest bidder. So this episode is an audit, a deep reckoning with the economics of words. We'll move through the great exchanges, from barter to branding, from oaths to algorithms, from promises to posts. And we'll ask, what happens when language becomes a marketplace? Who profits from the trade in meaning? And how can we restore linguistic wealth, the kind that can't be bought or sold? Because while we might live in an attention economy, we don't have to accept spiritual bankruptcy. There is still another kind of value, one found in truth, presence, and resonance. In ancient cultures, sacred language was never owned. Mantras, hymns, proverbs, they were shared freely, but with reverence. The more they were spoken, the more they multiplied in power. Contrast that with our world, where words are copyrighted, branded, and monetized, where language is not a common commodity. Something profound has shifted. And to understand it, we have to step back into history, anthropology, and our own linguistic habits to see how meaning became merchandise. Let's open the books. Let's walk through the marketplace of meaning and begin to see our words not just as expressions, but as assets, investments, and sometimes debts. Let's begin the marketplace of meaning. Every civilization has its marketplaces. In some cases, people trade goods. In others, they trade stories. But in ours, the marketplace is built from words. Every phrase, every slogan, every tweet is a unit of value, some minted freshly in the imagination, others recirculated so often they've lost all texture. Words have become currency, spent, borrowed, loaned, inflated, and devalued. Some accrue interest, others are bankrupt at birth. When I speak of the economics of words, I don't mean metaphor. I mean that language has become a literal system of value exchange, a network where attention is the coin, and meaning is the medium. But how did we get here? How did the sacred word once used to bless, bind, or heal become the slogan, the hashtag, the content we scroll past in seconds? The answer, as always, lies in history and in the slow evolution of what language means to us. From oath to offer, the birth of verbal value, long before there were banks or bonds, there were words. Before numbers tallied debts, promises tallied trust. Anthropologists like Marcel Mauss remind us that early economies were gift economies, built on reciprocity, obligation, and reputation. To give your word was not symbolic, it was binding. Your name, your honor, and your identity were collateral. If you kept your promise, your standing grew. If you broke it, you were bankrupt in spirit. Speech was credit, silence was default. In these worlds, language carried moral weight, not merely description, but transaction. An oath didn't describe loyalty, it performed it. This performative nature of speech, centuries before J.L. Austin named it, was the first linguistic economy. Words were deeds, not decorations. The semiotic shift from sacred to symbolic as societies grew, language detached from face-to-face trust. Words needed new scaffolds of meaning. With writing came abstraction, the move from embodied speech to inscribed symbol. A contract could bind strangers. A proclamation could outlive its speaker. Linguists like Ferdinand de Saussure showed us that meaning is differential. A word means what it does only because of its relation to others. In economic terms, value emerges from contrast. A coin is valuable because others aren't. A word holds weight because others differ. This insight, that language is a market of signs, would echo through the ages. Charles Sanders Peirce extended it. Words are not just labels but signs, triangulated between signifier, signified, and interpretant, speaker, concept, and listener. Meaning, like price, is negotiated in context. Every utterance is a trade between intention and interpretation. The rhetoric of power words as capital. By the classical era, rhetoric became a profession, the art of persuasion, the stock exchange of trust. Orators like Cicero and Aristotle taught how to invest words with ethos, pathos, logos, credibility, emotion, and logic, forms of linguistic capital that could purchase loyalty, votes, or peace. The philosopher Pierre Bourdieu later named this explicitly linguistic capital, the idea that speech styles, accents, vocabularies carry social value, exchanged for status, influence, and opportunity. A word spoken in one dialect earns prestige, in another disdain. From this view, language is not neutral. It's a market stratified by power. Elites coin the prestige forms. The masses adopt, adapt, or resist them. Every conversation is a negotiation of worth. And so, before a single advertisement existed, language was already economic, already weighed, traded, and taxed by class, region, and role. Print capitalism, selling meaning at scale. The invention of the printing press turned the spoken marketplace into a mass one. For the first time, ideas could be mass-produced. Pamphlets, treatises, Bibles, newspapers all became vehicles of persuasion. Benedict Anderson, in Imagined Communities, argues that print capitalism unified languages and constructed nations. Shared words built shared worlds. But they also created markets for meaning. Printers sold pamphlets the way merchants sold cloth. Writers became entrepreneurs of ideology. Luther's theses, Locke's treatises, Rousseau's social contract, all circulated as intellectual currency, purchasing revolutions in thought. Language was no longer just a medium of culture. It was an industry. The rise of branding, from promise to product by the Industrial Revolution. Persuasion had been mechanized. Factories produced goods faster than desires could keep up. So a new profession arose, advertising, the manufacture of want. Where promises once forged community, now they forge consumers. Where oaths once bound kin, now slogans bind buyers. Just do it. Because you're worth it. The happiest place on earth. These phrases aren't information, they're incantations. They compress ideology into melody. They bypass logic and plant identity. Cognitive linguist George Lakoff showed how metaphor frames thought. When an advert says freedom is a choice, it's not describing, it's framing, recruiting neural pathways, and embedding values. Each brand speaks its own grammar, selling not objects but ontologies. To buy is to belong. To repeat the slogan is to reinforce the spell. This is branding as enchantment, the corporate heir to ritual speech. The linguistic enclosure, privatizing the commons to brand, originally meant to burn a mark of ownership. Today, it means the same, but the livestock is linguistic. Words like Apple, Amazon, and Meta, once common nouns, are now trademarks. The semantic commons has been enclosed. Corporations claim not only products, but also parts of speech. This is more than a legal maneuver. It's semiotic colonization, the capture of meaning itself. And it doesn't stop at corporations. Social media platforms have trained individuals to do the same. Build your brand. Find your niche. Curate your voice. We are all invited, coerced, to become products of language. To turn the self into a slogan, the story into a sales pitch, even authenticity, once priceless, is now monetized. The relatable influencer, the vulnerable confession, the raw post. Each gesture of truth becomes a performance priced in likes. And when everything speaks to sell, silence becomes subversive. Inflation and the loss of linguistic value. Every economy faces inflation. In ours, it takes the form of semantic bleaching, the erosion of meaning through overuse. Epic, awesome, iconic, literally. Once rare, now everywhere, and thus valueless. In advertising, hyperbole is the norm. If everything is life-changing, nothing changes life. This inflation isn't accidental, it's strategic. When meaning is stretched, attention is hooked. But at scale, the currency collapses. We live amid linguistic hyperinflation, where noise outnumbers nuance. To restore value, we must speak less and mean more. The moral economy of words. Not all economies are measured in money. Some trade in trust, truth, and presence. In traditional societies, speech carried moral obligation. A lie wasn't merely false, it was corrupt, destabilizing the social balance. Today, misinformation circulates like counterfeit. The faster the exchange, the harder it is to audit. And yet, the principle remains. Words create worlds, and every false one weakens the fabric. The moral economy of language demands linguistic ethics, a commitment to accuracy, empathy, and proportion. To use words not merely for profit, but for coherence. Perhaps our greatest task now is not to mint new phrases, but to redeem old ones, to restore value through intention. Personal reflection, the cost of meaning. When I first began sharing my work, the inversiverse, the unfiltered human, and my inner child was broken, I didn't see them as commodities. They were acts of reflection, bridges between inner and outer worlds. But over time, I saw how quickly words are swept into systems, marketed, quoted, clipped, and reframed. Even truth once spoken can be repackaged as content. It's a strange feeling to realize that language, born from silence, now lives on feeds, that each sentence, however sincere, must navigate algorithms hungry for engagement. I've learned to treat words like currency, not in greed, but in gratitude, to spend them wisely, to save some for silence, because every word spent in haste devalues the tongue, and every word spoken in truth compounds interest in the soul. Reflection prompt pause for a moment. Think of one word you've spent too easily, a word you say often without meaning it. Sorry, love, fine, busy. What is its exchange rate now? What might it mean if you spoke it less, but lived it more? Our vocabularies are our vaults, and every utterance a withdrawal or a deposit. Activity, the word audit. Let's make this tangible. 1. Write down 5 words you use daily that didn't originate with you, words from ads, companies, or online slang. 2. Trace their source. Who minted them? What did they sell? 3. Ask, what economy of meaning do these words serve? 4. Now, beside each, write a counterword, one truer to your voice, unbranded, unbought. Notice how your energy shifts as you do. Language isn't just communication, it's circulation. And every reclaimed word is a debt forgiven. We live inside a marketplace of meaning, but we are not powerless traders. By becoming conscious of what we spend, we begin to invest differently. The future of language depends not on those who speak most, but on those who speak with worth. And so, as we leave this part behind, we carry a question forward. If words are currency, how do we buy back our attention? The attention economy, where the marketplace moves from speech to sight, and where focus itself becomes the prize. The attention economy. If part 1 showed us how words move markets, part 2 asks a deeper question. What happens when attention becomes the market itself? When every scroll, click, and pause feeds a vast linguistic ledger, and every word, slogan, and meme competes for cognitive real estate, language stops being just communication. It becomes currency. The grammar of persuasion turns into a grammar of transaction, and the most valuable resource in the world is no longer gold, oil, or data, but focus. We live in a time when phrases buy and sell our gaze, where algorithms translate curiosity into commerce, and where silence, once sacred, now feels economically inefficient. But before we dive into the digital, let's step back and see how this all began. The market of meaning. Long before hashtags and headlines, there was exchange. In ancient marketplaces, a merchant's cry wasn't just a call, it was a linguistic lure. Fresh figs, sweet honey. Each phrase is designed not to describe, but to capture, to reach the ear, spark the appetite, pull attention from competing voices. Linguist Deborah Tannen calls this conversational marketing, the art of phrasing speech as an appeal. Even in early oral cultures, language wasn't just symbolic, it was strategic. Each word held economic weight, a promise, a persuasion, a potential profit. Over centuries, that instinct formalized. Advertising evolved from tavern signs to billboards, from slogans to algorithms. Yet beneath the evolution, the spell remained. To speak is to sell. Not always for money, sometimes for meaning, identity, and validation, but always for something. Every age creates its own marketplace of language. Today, that marketplace is infinite, a digital bazaar where attention is mined, measured, and monetized. And the currency, words as currency. In the attention economy, every word has value, measurable, tradable, and extractable. Keywords in search engines bid for visibility. Headlines are A/B tested like commodities. Even our names become hashtags traded for clout. This is what linguist Norman Fairclough called marketized discourse, when every communicative act adopts the logic of the market. The tweet, the caption, the headline all become forms of branding. Every utterance asks, how will this perform? Rather than what does this mean? The danger is subtle. When words become currency, they stop being vessels of truth. They become tools of transaction. Advertising teaches us that value lies in visibility. But attention, once bought, rarely returns unchanged. Each impression shapes impressionability. Each slogan seeps into the psyche. As philosopher Byung-Chul Han warns, the society of transparency is the society of exhibition. We no longer speak to share, but to be seen. Our words become mirrors polished for market value, always reflecting, rarely revealing. Clickbait, clout, and the grammar of seduction. If every age has its rhetoric, ours is clickbait. A linguistic species evolved to thrive in conditions of distraction. Short, urgent, emotive, it bypasses reflection and hits instinct. Shocking truth. You won't believe what happened next. 10 ways to change your life. It's a grammar optimized for impulse. What ancient spells did through rhythm and repetition, clickbait does through curiosity and fear. In semiotic terms, these headlines act as floating signifiers, detached from depth, anchored only in effect. They hook emotion, not understanding. And like any addictive product, they deliver diminishing returns, more clicks, less contentment. Psychologically, this creates what cognitive scientists call attentional fragmentation, a mind perpetually grazing, never grounding. Our inner dialogue becomes a feed, snippets, slogans, fragments. Meaning becomes microdosed. The result is what writer Nicholas Carr famously called the shallows, a shift from deep to surface reading, from linear thought to associative skimming. The cost is not just comprehension, it's consciousness. We become fluent in fragments but strangers to synthesis. Linguistic inflation. When words lose value in economics, inflation occurs when too much currency chases too few goods. In linguistics, we face a similar crisis, too many words chasing too little attention. When every brand claims to be revolutionary, authentic, unprecedented, the words deflate. Their symbolic capital collapses under overuse. Sociolinguist Pierre Bourdieu argued that language circulates within markets of legitimacy. Some voices, some vocabularies, hold more value than others, not because of inherent truth, but institutional power. But in a hyper-saturated marketplace, everything becomes a pitch. Sincerity erodes under salesmanship. Empowerment becomes a tagline. Mindfulness becomes merchandise. Revolution becomes rebrand. And when language inflates, meaning impoverishes, we pay more attention but receive less truth. The commerce of emotion. The attention economy doesn't just trade in ideas, it trades in feelings. Fear, outrage, curiosity, and belonging are the high-yield assets of digital speech. Studies in effective linguistics show that emotionally charged words travel faster online. A 2017 MIT study found false news spreads 6 times faster than truth, largely because it triggers stronger emotions. The algorithm isn't biased toward lies, it's biased toward arousal. The result is an emotional marketplace where the loudest feelings win. Calm, complexity, and nuance. The currencies of depth can't compete with the volatility of shock, and so our lexicon shifts toward extremes. Love becomes obsessed. Dislike becomes hate. Concern becomes outrage. Our language, like our economy, thrives on boom and bust. Brands, influencers, and the voice as product. In the new economy, we are all brands, our voices assets, our stories capital. Linguist David Crystal notes how digital speech blurs boundaries between private and public discourse. The personal becomes performative. Intimacy becomes inventory. Influencers curate vocabularies as carefully as aesthetics. Every caption is a crafted identity, every phrase a positioning statement. This doesn't mean authenticity dies, but it becomes mediated. We speak less to reveal ourselves, more to reinforce the selves others expect. And slowly, our language begins to echo our analytics. What happens to consciousness when every sentence is also a sales pitch? When sincerity competes with SEO? We begin to see the return of what philosopher Guy Debord called the spectacle, not a shared reality, but a marketplace of appearances. Our words, once tools of connection, become tools of curation. Attention as moral choice in economics, value is measured by scarcity. In consciousness, value is measured by sincerity. Attention, then, is not just a cognitive act, it's a moral one. Every time we focus, we affirm, this matters. And every time we scatter, we declare, nothing does. The linguist Robin Lakoff once wrote, language uses us as much as we use language. The same is true of attention. When we stop choosing where to place it, the marketplace chooses for us. To reclaim attention, we must slow the syntax of our lives. Pause before posting, read before reacting, listen before replying. Because every act of attention is also an act of authorship. The question is, who's writing your story? The return to presence. There is an ancient counterspell to distraction. Presence. Not as a productivity hack, but as spiritual grammar. Mindfulness traditions, from Vipassana meditation to Christian contemplative prayer, teach the same lesson. Awareness is wealth. When we attend fully, language slows, perception deepens, and the noise dissolves into nuance. Modern neuroscience agrees. Studies on sustained attention show that mindful awareness strengthens the prefrontal cortex, restoring cognitive control. We reclaim the power to direct rather than distribute consciousness. And linguistically, presence changes everything. We stop reaching for prepackaged phrases and begin to inhabit words again. Speech regains texture, pauses return, silence becomes syntax. In our presence, we rediscover language not as a commodity, but as communion, personal reflection, finding focus in the noise. There was a time when I mistook productivity for purpose, when I equated a full schedule with a full life. Every ping, every post, every notification felt like a call I couldn't ignore. I told myself I was learning, staying informed, staying connected. But beneath it, I was leaking energy through 1,000 tiny cracks. I remember one week vividly, I'd been researching for multiple projects at once. I thought multitasking was mastery. I'd scroll through articles while replying to messages, drafting scripts while checking analytics. But when I stepped back, I realized I hadn't truly inhabited a single word. My eyes had passed over thousands, but none had passed through me. That was when I began to see attention differently, not as a mental reflex, but as a moral choice. Every moment I gave to noise was a moment I withheld from depth. Every click was an act of belief, a declaration that this phrase, this story, this fragment, deserved to shape my mind. And once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. It became impossible to scroll without asking, what am I buying with my focus? What am I selling by giving it away? In that awareness, my language changed. I stopped rushing to fill the silence with content. I began writing less, but meaning more. When I sit now to craft an episode or write a page, I slow down. I listen, because I've learned that meaning doesn't shout, it waits. And the words that truly matter arrive only when the noise subsides. That shift wasn't instant. It came through trial, burnout, and the realization that attention is the root of authorship. We cannot create consciously if we live unconsciously. And reclaiming my attention was the first step in reclaiming my voice. So now when I speak of attention as currency, it isn't theoretical. It's alive. I've felt the cost of spending it carelessly and the quiet wealth that returns when I spend it wisely. Reflection prompt. Where is your attention right now? Is it scattered across tabs, apps, and thoughts, or resting here, fully present? Imagine your attention as a beam of light. Notice how it shifts when you name it. What words pull it? What words release it? This pause isn't passive, it's a reclamation. Attention is the most radical form of authorship you have. Spend it wisely. Activity, the 24-hour audit. Try this. For one day, become an attention accountant. Keep a small notebook or voice note log. Each hour, note where your focus went. Conversations, scrolling, study, or silence. Don't judge, just record. At the end of 24 hours, read it back. What patterns emerge? Which words, images, or voices occupied your mind most? How much of your attention was spent, and how much was invested? Then ask, if attention is currency, am I wealthy or in debt? Branding, identity, and linguistic capital. There's a point at which language stops simply expressing us and starts selling us. A point where the words we use, the tone we adopt, even the pauses between our sentences, become signals, not of who we are, but of how we want to be seen. In this era, words are not just currency. They are currency-backed identities. Every tweet, caption, and bio is a transaction in the attention economy. And if words are coins, then brand language is the mint, the authority that decides what counts as valuable speech. But there's another side, a quieter one. The voice beneath the brand. The nervous system hums beneath the slogan. The breath before the performance. That's where the mirror linguistic hypothesis and nervous system language come in. Tools for returning to resonance, restoring coherence between word, body, and meaning. Because in a world where corporations have mastered the psychology of speech, the most radical act might be to speak slowly, truthfully, and with full awareness of your own breath. From words as currency to words identity. When I first began exploring the economics of language, I saw it primarily as a question of exchange, words buying attention, slogans trading in desire, hashtags turning sentiment into data. But the more I studied, the more I realized this economy doesn't just shape how we speak, it reshapes who we become. Branding doesn't start with a logo, it starts with language. Every major brand begins by crafting a voice that is confident, trustworthy, and aspirational. But in the process, the human voice, the trembling, uncertain, contradictory one, gets edited out. Somewhere along the line, identity became inseparable from branding. What began as corporate differentiation became personal necessity. Today, who are you often means how do you appear? And how you appear is linguistically performed. Tone, cadence, vocabulary, rhythm. The brand itself isn't a mask you wear, it's a language you learn. Pierre Bourdieu once called this linguistic capital, the capacity to speak in a way that society deems legitimate. Just as wealth grants access to power, speech, if coded correctly, grants access to opportunity. In a courtroom, the right accent confers credibility. In academia, jargon confers belonging. On social media, brevity and buzzwords confer virality. The tragedy is that many people confuse linguistic compliance with authentic expression. They learn to mimic the voice, whether it's corporate, academic, or aesthetic, and in doing so, lose their own. I know this feeling well. Early in my work, I found myself adjusting my tone, smoothing edges, shortening sentences, aligning my language to invisible norms. It took time, and many false starts, before I realized. The voice that resonates most deeply isn't the one that performs fluency. it's the one that mirrors truth. That realization birthed my commitment to the mirror linguistic hypothesis, the idea that language, at its best, should resonate with the nervous system, not override it, that each word we choose should regulate, not agitate, connect, not coerce. But before we explore how MLH and NSL help us reclaim our voices, we need to see the machinery we're up against. Because make no mistake, the branding machine is not neutral. It is linguistic engineering, weaponized, the branded self. When identity becomes product, scroll through any social platform and you'll see it. A sea of authentic voices, all speaking the same way. Curated vulnerability, relatable confessions, inspirational aphorisms. Even rebellion has a brand tone now. This isn't a coincidence, it's conditioning. Self-branding theory, explored by Alice Marick and Sarah Banate-Weiser, shows how individuals internalize marketing logic. We don't just sell products anymore, we become products. The self turns into a story optimized for algorithms, catchy, consistent, emotionally engaging. It's not that people are faking, it's that authenticity itself has become aesthetic. Authentic is now a style, not a state. The irony is painful. The more we try to be real, the more we rehearse. The more we polish, the less we feel. I've experienced this tension. When I began releasing the Linguaverse, I wanted every sentence to feel alive, but not performative. The more I wrote, the more I realized I wasn't marketing, I was mirroring. Each word had to reflect a lived truth, not a strategy. That's where the split reveals itself. Branding speaks at you, authenticity speaks from you. Branding chases resonance, authenticity is resonance. The difference lies in embodiment. A branded voice can mimic vulnerability, but it can't synchronize breath. It can echo empathy, but not attune physiology. That's where the nervous system language becomes radical. It reintroduces the body into speech. When I speak in NSL, I'm not trying to impress. I'm trying to co-regulate. My pace slows. My tone softens. My words settle. In this mode, language isn't performance, it's presence, and presence cannot be branded. Linguistic capital. The economy of voice Bourdieu argued that language operates like currency in a marketplace of legitimacy. Every utterance carries value based on context. Speak correctly, and you're rewarded. Speak wrongly, and you're dismissed. In this system, accents are credit scores. Dialects are liabilities. Vocabulary is collateral, but the modern twist is algorithmic. In digital spaces, your accent isn't judged by human ears. It's passed by machine learning models. Clarity, brevity, and predictability score highest. Rambling nuance, poetic ambiguity, these confuse the algorithm, which means, once again, those with neurodivergent patterns, nonlinear speech, emotional surges, and associative leaps are penalized. The machine interprets differences as noise. I've seen this play out. In meetings, neurodivergent voices are often labeled intense or unclear, when in truth, they're simply processing at depth. The branded economy has little patience for depth. It rewards the crisp, the catchy, the clickable. Reclaiming linguistic capital, then, isn't about learning to sound more legitimate. It's about refusing to equate legitimacy with fluency. It's about building spaces where slow, uncertain, trembling speech counts as truth. That's where MLH comes in again. Instead of forcing speech into pre-approved shapes, we listen for resonance, not perfection. A voice that trembles is still a voice. A pause is still communication. In this model, coherence is felt, not graded, because the value of speech is not in its polish, but in its presence. Brand language, from companies to consciousness. If corporations once needed to convince us to buy, now they need to convince us to be. Apple doesn't sell phones, it sells thinking differently. Nike doesn't sell shoes, it sells just doing it. These slogans aren't descriptions, they're identity scripts. To repeat them is to internalize them. This is the true genius and danger of modern branding. It colonizes language at the level of self-concept. When you say, I'm a Mac person, or I'm a Nike kind of guy, you're not describing preference. You're performing allegiance. The phrase fuses product and person, collapsing choice into identity. And the structure of these slogans is linguistic hypnosis. Conditional tenses, you will, you'll feel, you'll love, future orientation that bypasses critical thought. Imperatives, think different, just do it, bypass permission entirely. Each is a micro-spell, compressing thought, embedding desire, directing action. Let me paint a scene. Scenario, watching the Apple launch. You sit in a dim room, screen glowing. The music swells, minimalist piano, slow heartbeat bass. On stage, a presenter stands in a pool of white light. Every sentence is calibrated. Today, we're introducing something truly revolutionary. You've never seen anything like this before. It will change the way you live, work, and connect. Notice the tense, will change, not may, not might. The future is declared as fact. This is linguistic determinism, a spell of certainty. The cadence is hypnotic, short sentences, strategic pauses, rising intonation, signaling revelation. Each slide unveils a product against a black void, the visual language of divinity. The body responds, microdoses of dopamine fire with every reveal. Pupils dilate, shoulders lean forward. The heartbeat synchronizes to the rhythm of the soundtrack. This isn't a metaphor, it's physiology. Neuromarketing studies confirm. During product launches, mirror neurons fire in response to gestures, tone, and collective anticipation. The body rehearses ownership before the mind decides. By the time the price appears, the decision isn't cognitive, it's somatic. The spell has already been cast. Now pause. This is where the mirror linguistic hypothesis becomes a shield. Instead of letting the presenter's cadence entrain your breath, you slow it deliberately. You ground your body. You name sensations. My shoulders are tight. My breath is shallow. Then engage NSL. Speak silently to your nervous system. I am observing. I am here. As the presenter says, you'll love the way it feels. You whisper back. I will decide what I feel. This is counter spell work. Conscious response breaking unconscious trance. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. The future tense is not a forecast. It's a command. And every you will you hear is an invitation to reclaim I may. That's the essence of linguistic sovereignty. The marketplace of authenticity. We live in an era where authenticity is itself a brand. Influencers cry on cue, corporations celebrate transparency, and every brand has a story. Sarah Banet-Weiser calls this authentic, the commodification of the real. The more raw, the more marketable. But true authenticity doesn't scale. It's not reproducible. It's not an aesthetic. It's an alignment. When I began integrating MLH and NSL into my own work, something shifted. I stopped trying to explain the truth and started embodying it. Sentences grew quieter. Pauses longer, certainty softened into curiosity, and something unexpected happened. Resonance deepened, more grounded. Engagement slowed, but retention rose. The message wasn't louder, it was clearer. That's the paradox. In a market built on speed, stillness becomes subversive. Resistance, reclaiming the unbranded voice. To reclaim language from branding, we need more than critique, we need practice. Counterspells for branded speech include silence, refusing to fill space with slogans. Slowness, letting meaning unfold at human tempo. Narrative, telling full stories, not taglines. Embodiment, anchoring speech in sensation, not simulation. And above all, resonance, speaking in a way that your body can believe. The MLH invites us to treat language like tuning forks. When a word vibrates with integrity, the nervous system expands. When it clangs false, contraction follows. The NSL gives us tools to read those cues. Breath tightens, the word is wrong. Shoulders drop, the word is true. These are not metaphors, they are diagnostics. Because if corporations can measure your micro-reactions to sell, you can measure your own to stay sovereign. When I catch myself repeating a slogan, I now pause, breathe. I ask, do I mean this? If not, I reword, I reclaim, I re-enchant language with consciousness. Because every slogan is a spell, but every breath is a counterspell. Reflection pause. Where do you perform your voice, and where do you inhabit it? What words do you use for belonging that no longer feel true? How does your body respond when you say them? Write them down, speak them aloud. Notice resonance. Activity Linguistic Capital Inventory 1. Write down 10 phrases you use across different contexts, at work, with friends, and online. 2. Circle the ones that feel authentic. 3. Cross out the ones that feel performative. 4. For each crossed out phrase, write one that feels more you. 5. Practice using those in real conversation. Then go a step further. Watch a corporate ad or keynote. Note every future tense, every imperative, every buzzword. Translate them into present moment, body-based statements. Example, you'll love this new feature, proceeding to, I'm noticing curiosity about this feature. This product will change your life, proceeding to, I choose what changes my life. These rewrites are micro-liberations. Word by word, you exit the spell. The brand itself is not inevitable. It is learned, and anything learned can be unlearned. Language built the brand. Language can unbuild it. And in its place, a new lexicon waits, one rooted in resonance, not reaction. Sovereignty, not sales. Because the future of the spell depends on who speaks it. And this time, the voice might just be yours. Algorithmic value. When we talk about value, we often think of coins, credit, or capital. But in our age, value has slipped into subtler forms: clicks, views, impressions, engagement. The currency isn't gold or grain anymore, it's attention. And attention, like all currencies, is measured, mined, and manipulated through language. Every word we write online, every caption, headline, title, or comment is sifted through invisible hands that price it, rank it, and decide whether it's worthy of being seen. Algorithms, those silent arbiters of the digital age, have become our new linguistic bankers. They don't just process data, they assign worth to words. And that worth is rarely measured in truth. It's measured in performance. The marketplace of meaning. Once upon a time, the value of language was intrinsic. A word held power because it resonated, because it spoke to something within us. Now its value is determined by metrics. A sentence that sparks outrage or clicks carries more weight than one that invites contemplation. Platforms reward velocity over veracity. Meaning becomes secondary to momentum. If a word doesn't trend, it's invisible. We've moved from language as art to language as an asset. From speech as sacred to speech as strategic. In this new economy, every post is a pitch. Every comment is a calculation. Every sentence is an investment in visibility. Search engines and social media platforms act as linguistic markets. Keywords rise and fall like stocks. A trending phrase is a bull run. A banned word is a market crash. And just like currency speculation, much of this valuation is psychological, driven by sentiment, novelty, virality. The irony is clear. In chasing reach, we've begun to speak in tongues that aren't our own. We tailor our words not to express what we mean, but to meet the appetites of machines. This is where the algorithmic spell begins, a kind of linguistic capitalism where our vocabulary becomes venture capital. Algorithms as editors. There was a time when editors were human. They asked, is this honest? Is this clear? Is this worth saying? Now our editors are invisible, automated, emotionally illiterate yet behaviorally omniscient. They optimize for engagement, not enlightenment. They decide which phrases float and which sink, who is heard and who is buried. Every time you post online, your words pass through a silent screening room. An algorithm decides whether they are valuable enough to amplify, whether they match community guidelines, whether they fit the rhythm of the moment. These systems learn from us. They study the velocity of our sentences, the emotional pitch of our tone, the cadence of our punctuation. They adapt to our cravings, then shape our cravings in return. And slowly, imperceptibly, we adapt to them. We self-edit before the algorithm can. We anticipate what works. We use shorter sentences, spikier phrases, and more urgent hooks. We substitute sincerity for SEO. Language bends to fit the template of virality, an architecture designed not for dialogue, but dopamine. In the process, meaning gets traded for momentum. The price of emotion outrage pays better than nuance. Certainty pays better than curiosity. Conflict pays better than compassion. The attention economy doesn't reward what nourishes the soul. It rewards what spikes the pulse. In neurobiological terms, platforms are built to stimulate the amygdala, the part of the brain that reacts to threat. Fear, anger, moral disgust, these are high-value emotions in digital trade. They hold attention longer, provoke response, and generate friction, which algorithms interpret as engagement. So the linguistic market inflates with outrage. We say more extreme things to be seen. We simplify what is complex. We dramatize what is mundane. Words, once used to bridge understanding, become weapons to win attention. Even the emotional range of our vocabulary shrinks. The subtle shades of feeling, wistfulness, tenderness, and melancholy are drowned by the loud colors of rage and rapture. The economy of expression collapses toward polarity. Linguistic inflation, when everything is epic, nothing is. When every story is breaking, none are. When everyone is a legend, language loses its gravity. We're living through a kind of linguistic inflation where words once rare and rich are spent like loose change. Epic, iconic, insane, genius, these used to signify the extraordinary. Now they are tossed across captions, headlines, and hashtags until their meaning dissolves. Just as printing too much money devalues a currency, overusing powerful words devalues expression. Linguistic inflation happens not just through overuse, but through automation. Predictive text systems, our miniature AI scribes, feed us familiar phrases. They autocomplete our emotions. They whisper, "You mean this," until we agree. The result is a feedback loop of sameness. A homogenized lexicon where originality is replaced by optimization. It's not just that our words are worth less, it's that they are worth the same. Reflection. The stadium spell, I remember noticing this long before I ever thought about algorithms. In the early 2000s, I was a regular at Old Trafford to watch Manchester United play. Match days were rituals. There was tension, excitement, and unity. The language of the crowd was alive, a collective pulse of chants, reactions, spontaneous roars. But when I stayed home and watched on TV, something felt different. The broadcast wrapped the game in pre-match hype, commentary loops, and advertisements. Narration filled every silence. Emotion was framed for me before I could feel it myself. At the stadium, I was part of the language. My voice joined the chorus. At home, I was a consumer of it, a spectator absorbing a script. The commentary told me when to feel tension, when to celebrate, and when to mourn. The spell was different. One was communal, the other commodified. Later, I realized this was a microcosm of algorithmic value. In the raw space of presence, language emerged from experience. In the mediated space, experience was shaped by language, and the latter was far easier to monetize. The corporate incantation. The same pattern plays out whenever a major tech company, say Apple, launches a new product. If you've ever watched one of those sleek keynotes, you know the rhythm. It's theatrical, ritualistic, almost liturgical, soft lighting, minimalist stage, calm voiceover, a slow, deliberate build, phrases like "it just works," "one more thing," our most powerful device yet. These aren't just marketing slogans, they're modern incantations. Each line is crafted to trigger trust, awe, and belonging. Watch closely, and you'll notice how language, sound, and image co-regulate the nervous system. The tempo of the music slows the breath. The symmetry of the visuals soothes the eyes. The tone of voice carries authority. The result? A trance state, a receptive audience. a body ready to believe. What follows is the spell of aspiration, the subtle linguistic tether between desire and identity. You're not just buying a phone, you're buying who you'll be when you own it. It's here that nervous system language (NSL) and mirror linguistic hypothesis (MLH) become vital tools. When we become aware of how speech and tone entrain our physiology, we can break the cycle of manipulation. To watch a keynote consciously is to observe your breath, posture, pulse. Do you lean forward? Hold your breath. Feel an urge to act. Each of these is data not for the algorithm, but for you. Grounding yourself before the spell takes hold allows language to pass through without binding. You hear the pitch, but it doesn't possess you. That's linguistic sovereignty, words priced by machines. The next evolution of this is subtler still. Algorithms now assign monetary value to phrases before they're even read by humans. In advertising systems, a single keyword can cost more than gold, insurance, lawyer, mortgage. Others, like poetry or healing, are cheap. This is literal linguistic capitalism, value tethered not to meaning, but to monetization potential. In creative spaces, algorithms predict what titles perform. They tell authors which keywords sell, which hooks convert. The line between writer and marketer blurs until language feels less like art and more like arithmetic. But the deeper cost is unseen. When our expression becomes transactional, authenticity erodes. We stop asking, what do I feel? We start asking, what will we perform? Personal reflection. When my words shifted, there were moments, even in my own journey, where I saw this happen. Times when I wrote from intuition and later caught myself editing for engagement. Maybe the title needed to be punchier. Maybe the phrasing is too subtle, too soft. Maybe honesty wouldn't trend. It's easy to tell ourselves this is harmless. Just good strategy. But strategy, repeated enough, becomes identity. And somewhere between optimization and authenticity, we lose the voice that began the work. That's the great irony. Algorithms that claim to personalize our feeds end up depersonalizing our speech and us. We become a product of someone else's design and lens through which we see the world and ourselves. The path back, I've learned, isn't rejection. It's awareness. When I write now, I ask, who am I speaking to, them or the machine? If the answer isn't the truth, I start again. Reflection prompt. Have you ever changed your words, softened them, sharpened them, sweetened them, because you thought they'd do better? Have you caught yourself deleting a sentence that felt too sincere, too long, too slow, afraid it wouldn't hit? That moment is the hinge between sovereignty and spell, between your voice and the algorithm's echo. Activity. Optimize authentic 1. Take one heartfelt message, a post poem or reflection you've written. 2. Paste it into an AI optimization tool. Ask it to improve engagement. 3. Compare the results. How did the tone change? Did the rhythm quicken? Did sincerity soften? Did the algorithm remove your pauses, your breath? Now, read both aloud. Notice how each feels in your body. The first may tremble, crack, breathe, but it's yours. The second may flow smoother, louder, but it's theirs. Which one holds value you can't count? Bridging forward. If algorithms have become our invisible editors, then reclaiming meaning requires more than critique. It requires new grammars of value, languages that can't be mined, only made. That's where we turn next, to reclaiming linguistic wealth, to the possibility that meaning, not metrics, is the true measure of abundance, to the practices, theories, and spells that bring us back to language as life, not labor. Because in the end, the richest word isn't the one that sells, it's the one that sings. Reclaiming linguistic wealth. If language can be spent, it can also be saved. If it can be mined, it can also be restored. And if it can be hijacked to sell illusions, it can be reclaimed to tell the truth. I've come to see that the most valuable words are rarely the ones that trend, but the ones that transform. The ones we whisper to ourselves in quiet resolve. The ones we return to across a lifetime because they root us. This part of our journey isn't about rejecting modernity, algorithms, or commerce. It's about remembering that words are not merely tools of transaction, they're vessels of intention. Every time we speak, we cast a vote for a certain kind of world. So how do we spend wisely? How do we create language that generates rather than extracts? How do we rebuild a linguistic economy where value means meaning, not metrics? The answer begins not with the market, but with the self and the mirror linguistic hypothesis, words as resonance. When I began developing what I've called the mirror linguistic hypothesis, it was out of necessity, a way to understand why some language harmonized with the nervous system, while other language fragmented it. At its core, the MLH proposes that language doesn't simply represent inner states, it resonates with them. Words act like tuning forks, vibrating not only within our cognitive field, but also within the body's subtle rhythms. When we hear language that honors truth, breath deepens, the chest expands, muscles soften. When we hear manipulation, dishonesty, or coercion, tension creeps in, jaw tightens, breath shortens, pulse quickens. In this way, language is not merely semantic, but somatic. It's not just about what a word means, but how it lands. This has profound implications for reclaiming linguistic wealth. Because if words carry frequency, then speaking consciously is an act of calibration. We don't just speak our truth, we tune ourselves and those around us. In a world where language is weaponized to trigger reactivity, a single word spoken in awareness can become a stabilizing field. MLH teaches us to pause before we post, before we reply, before we preach. To listen not only to the content of a message, but to its resonance. Does it expand or contract, empower or extract, unite or divide? That's the first step in linguistic sovereignty, developing resonance literacy. Nervous system language, NSL. Speech that regulates the second step is embodiment, what I call nervous system language. If MLH is a resonance, NSL is about regulation. It recognizes that every interaction is co-regulation in disguise. The way we phrase our words, modulate our tone, and pace our sentences signals safety or threat to those we speak with and to ourselves. NSL invites us to see language not as performance, but as physiology in motion. When our nervous system is grounded, our words follow suit. They slow down, become rhythmic, curious, and clear. By contrast, when we speak from a state of survival, urgency, fear, anger, our words scatter. They become sharp, binary, transactional. We've built an economy on dysregulated speech. Urgent headlines, clickbait, doom scrolling, rage bait threads. The linguistic equivalent of fast food. To reclaim linguistic wealth, we must return to slow language, speech born of breath, not panic. Here's a simple practice I use before recording, writing, or posting for grounding one. Place one hand on the chest. 2. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. 3. Ask silently, what state am I in? 4. Then ask, what state am I about to speak into? If there's mismatch, if agitation meets gentleness or exhaustion meets performance, pause. Realign. Don't speak until the breath steadies. That silence is wealth. It accrues presence. In time, NSL helps us recondition our linguistic reflexes. Instead of feeding the algorithm with urgency, we feed ourselves with calm. This isn't withdrawal from the world. It's reinvestment in what's real. From consumers to creators, the algorithmic marketplace taught us to treat language as a commodity. MLH and NSL remind is a craft. Each sentence becomes a sculpted gesture. Each word is a deliberate stroke. This shift from consumer to creator changes everything. We stop chasing viral templates and start cultivating personal vocabularies. In practice, that means we might choose a smaller audience, but a deeper dialogue. We might resist trending phrases that misrepresent our voice. We might replace content with conversation. True linguistic wealth grows in the soil of integrity. And integrity, those slow compounds. You can feel this even in ancient oral traditions. Storytellers weren't paid per view. They were paid in trust, memory, and belonging. A single proverb could carry generations of guidance. Contrast that with the attention economy's churn, millions of words born each second, most forgotten within hours. The reclaimed self speaks not for clicks, but for continuity. Language alchemy. Words that heal in alchemy, lead becomes gold through fire, time, and transformation. In linguistic alchemy, unconscious speech becomes sacred through awareness. Each time we transmute reaction into reflection, we refine our vocabulary. Each time we choose patience over performance, we mint meaning. Some words are worth keeping in your inner vault, words that hold warmth, courage, and clarity. Others, you may decide to divest from jargon, labels, and buzzwords that distort. Ask yourself, which words in my daily life yield abundance, gratitude, empathy, and curiosity? Which words deplete, should, never, always, failure? Reclaiming linguistic wealth means curating a portfolio of terms that return energy rather than extract it. Countering corporate spellcraft earlier, we spoke of corporate incantations, the language of marketing and manipulation. Phrases engineered to hijack desire and convert attention into action. But awareness is a solvent. Once we recognize the structure of the spell, we can rewrite it. Here's where MLH and NSL become counter-magic. Resonance check, MLH. Does the phrase align with my truth or fracture it? Physiological cue, NSL. Does my breath deepen or constrict when I hear it? Imagine watching an Apple keynote through this lens. As the voiceover speaks of innovation and empowerment, you tune inward. You sense your body lean forward, your pulse rise, a subtle urge to belong. Then you breathe. You soften. You ask, is this desire mine, or was it scripted, implanted within me to desire, want, or need? That single act reclaims agency. The spell weakens. Over time, these micro moments of awareness rebuild sovereignty. We become immune not by withdrawal, but by discernment. In linguistic economics, that's the difference between spending impulsively and investing wisely. Personal reflection. The shift from monetization to meaning. In my own creative evolution, from the Linguaverse to the unfiltered human to this very project, I've watched how the language I use reflects the state I'm in. When I wrote purely to be understood, my words carried strain. When I wrote to be authentic, they carried silence between syllables. And when I wrote to serve truth, they began to breathe. I've learned that meaning compounds like interest, slowly, invisibly, faithfully. Every time I choose precision over popularity, integrity over immediacy, I plant a seed in this new economy. I don't write to persuade, I write to mirror. I don't perform to capture attention. I speak to return it. The irony is, as I let go of chasing numbers, genuine connection grew. The audience found resonance, not performance. That's the quiet wealth of language reclaimed. Building slow language, fast language burns quickly and brightly. Slow language lingers. To build slow language is to treat each word like a breath, intentional, cyclical, finite. It's a practice of attention, not acceleration. You'll find it in handwritten letters, long-form reflections, and voice notes shared between friends, in conversations without agendas, in art unhurried by algorithms. Slow language restores time to meaning, the one resource automation cannot counterfeit. So next time you write, ask, could I speak this slower? Could I say less, but mean more? Could I trust silence to do some of the speaking? That's how linguistic wealth regenerates, through patience, presence, and precision. Activity. Create your meaning portfolio 1. Take a journal and draw 2 columns, priceless and devalued. 2. Under priceless, list 10 words that hold deep personal meaning. These might be words tied to memory, insight, or aspiration. 3. Under devalued, list words you feel have lost resonance, cliches, buzzwords, terms that no longer nourish you. 4. For each priceless word, write why it matters, what state it evokes in your body, what truth it mirrors in your life. Keep this as your meaning portfolio. Return to it when you feel lost in the noise. These are your assets, not for sale, not for trend, but for truth. As we near the end of this episode, remember, every linguistic economy begins with a choice. Spend words like currency, and you'll be forever indebted to the market. Speak words like breath, and you'll find they multiply meaning on their own. In the next section, we'll tally the balance, the assets and liabilities of our speech, and explore how to invest our attention in alignment with our values. Because in the final reckoning, wealth isn't what words earn, it's what they awaken. The wealth of meaning. If I've learned anything from studying language as currency, it's that wealth has never truly been about numbers, not in finance, not in words. Real wealth, linguistic, emotional, spiritual, lies in circulation. A language that hoards meaning becomes sterile. A voice that only sells becomes hollow. A world that spends attention without reflection goes bankrupt in its soul. We are living through a linguistic boom market, words minted faster than they can be felt. Hashtags erupt, trends inflate, and slogans saturate the semantic air. But in this abundance of utterance, value has thinned. Buzzwords depreciate with overuse. Sincerity becomes a rare commodity. The richest word is now the one spoken with presence. The invisible market every day, we enter the bazaar. The stalls are glowing screens. The traders are brands, influencers, institutions, and algorithms whispering promises. They barter with phrases engineered to trigger. Limited offer. Breaking news. Don't miss out. Each headline is a bid for our pulse. Each notification a toll on attention. We scroll through auctions of identity. Curated captions, branded selves, filtered emotions. And though no coins change hands, something priceless does. Our focus. In economic terms, focus is a finite supply. In nervous system terms, it's life force. When hijacked, we feel scattered, restless, perpetually unsatisfied, the body echoing the market's volatility. This is where nervous system language becomes revolutionary. Instead of spending attention reactively, we learn to invest it consciously, speaking and listening in rhythms that regulate rather than deplete. A single grounded breath before posting, a slower cadence in conversation, a refusal to match the panic of headlines with hurried speech. Such microacts reprice the market. They tell the body, I choose where my energy flows, auditing my own speech. There was a period, midway through my creative journey, when I realized I was chasing metrics more than meaning, crafting posts for reach, not resonance, watching analytics instead of listening for insight. The turning point came quietly, rereading an old blog entry written post-meditation. The words were unpolished, unseen by anyone else, yet they vibrated with truth. I felt calm, expanded, solvent again. It struck me then, authentic language regulates, performative language agitates. Each sentence either deposits into coherence or withdraws from it. So I began my own linguistic audit. Which phrases left me tense? Which restored ease? Which words did I speak out of fear of being forgotten? Which emerged from curiosity? Over months, I replaced slogans with sincerity, velocity with silence. The ROI was immediate, not in followers but in flow. Reclaiming the mint. To reclaim linguistic wealth, we must repossess the mint itself, the inner chamber where words are struck from thought. In the modern era, that mint is outsourced. Predictive text finishes our sentences. Corporate copywriters script our aspirations. Memes pre-package our emotions. But the mirror linguistic hypothesis reminds us, language is resonance. The phrase we utter imprints back upon the nervous system that produced it. Outsource enough of your speech, and you outsource your state. To mint words of worth, return to the forge. Temper them in silence. Test them against sensation. Stamp them with intention. A self-spoken word, aligned with breath and belief, carries more purchasing power than 1,000 trend-optimized slogans. The portfolio of meaning. Traditional portfolios diversify assets for stability. A meaning portfolio diversifies language for vitality. Here's how I built mine and how you might build yours. 1. Identify core holdings, 10 words that hold personal, not market value. Mine include truth, stillness, wonder, reciprocity, grace, discernment, breath, courage, coherence, and home. Each word earns interest through use, not exposure. 2. Map emotional yield. Note how the body responds when each word is spoken aloud. Warmth, expansion, calm. These sensations are your dividends. 3. Hedge against hype. For every buzzword you retire, epic, game changer, introduce a handmade phrase, something slower, specific yours. 4. Reinvest profit. Share language that enriches you, poetry, proverbs, precise descriptions, so collective wealth rises. Over time, this portfolio becomes a linguistic pension, meaning that it compounds rather than corrodes. The linguistic balance sheet, expanded practice, take another page. Draw the line again. Left, assets. Right, liabilities. But this time, go deeper than vocabulary. Include speech acts, assets words that clarify, questions that invite, stories that heal, silences that honor, liabilities phrases that posture, comments that compare, jokes that wound, headlines that hook. Now perform somatic double entry. For each asset, notice where ease arises. For each liability, locate the tension. This body ledger reveals truths analytics can't. Language is accounted for in sensation before statistics. When finished, whisper a closing phrase, perhaps balanced. Feel the nervous system settle, the books momentarily aligned. The gift economy of speech. Not all economies extract. Some gifts. In gift cultures, value circulates through generosity, not scarcity. Likewise, in conscious communication, words gain power by being given freely, without expectation of return. Compliments offered without agenda. Teachings shared without gatekeeping. Apologies spoken without defense. Each act reintroduces trust into circulation. Each sincere phrase demonetizes the connection. When enough of us transact in kindness, the market recalibrates. Attention, once exploited, becomes attunement. Integrating MLH and NSL as counterspells, corporations deploy branding linguistics to hook limbic systems, urgency fonts, dopamine diction, and scarcity syntax. Our antidote is resonant language rooted in physiology. Through the mirror linguistic hypothesis, we remember every word is a mirror neuron firing. Speak calmly, evoke calm. Speak frenzy, summon frenzy. Through nervous system language, we practice linguistic grounding. Begin sentences on the out breath. Anchor abstract terms in sensory imagery. Replace should with could, reopening choice pathways. In doing so, we neutralize manipulative cadence with coherence cadence. Their spell seeks impulse. Ours restores impulse control. Their aim is conversion. Ours is conversation. Personal reflection. The stadium and the screen years ago, I noticed the first fracture in my faith in spectacles. Saturday afternoons spent watching Manchester United, sometimes in the roaring stadium, sometimes on a glowing screen. At Old Trafford, the chant was heartbeat. Strangers became kin. The language was collective breath, spontaneous, unscripted. At home, commentary filled every silence, commercials every pause. The broadcast spoke for me, narrating feelings I hadn't yet formed. The difference was visceral. In person, I inhabited the game. On screen, the game inhabited me. That contrast revealed how media modulate meaning. Remove embodied resonance, insert curated commentary, and participation becomes consumption. It was a small revelation, but it cracked the enchantment. I began hearing the marketing, the myth-making, the monetization humming beneath the charts, and once heard, it could not be unheard. Awareness, I realized, is the first dividend of linguistic literacy. Final reflection prompts before we close. 3 final prompts for your own linguistic audit. 1. Enrichment check. Which words leave you more alive after speaking? Which conversational spaces feel like fertile soil? 2. Debt assessment. Which dialogues do you replay with regret? Where do you overspend attention for minimal return? 3. Investment strategy. How will you seed tomorrow's vocabulary? Which silences will you safeguard as savings? Answer gently. These are lifelong ledgers. Spending words wisely, language, like money, is meaningless until exchanged. But unlike money, it regenerates in the giving. Every phrase uttered in awareness multiplies value. Every pause taken before reaction compounds peace. The future economy will not be measured in clicks or coins, but in coherence, how aligned our words are with truth, care, and embodiment. As this episode closes, take inventory. Your vocabulary is a vault. Your breath, the mint. Your attention, the treasury. Guard them, grow them, gift them. When next you write a caption, sign a contract, whisper a promise, or craft a prayer, ask, is this expenditure aligned with the wealth I wish to build? If yes, spend freely. If not, invest silence. Because silence, too, accrues interest. Key takeaways: words are economic acts. Every utterance invests or indebts. Algorithms act as appraisers. Awareness reclaims valuation. MLH and NSL offer counterspells, resonance over reaction. Linguistic audits reveal assets of authenticity, liabilities of illusion. True prosperity is measured in meaning, not metrics. Coming next, episode 19. the language of dreams, symbols, archetypes, and the unconscious will journey from markets to myths, exploring how the psyche mints meaning in metaphor, how symbols trade between waking and sleeping worlds, and how the unconscious writes poetry beyond profit. Until then, may your sentences be solvent, your syntax sincere, and your silence strategic. Spend your words with care, invest your breath in truth, and let meaning be the only interest you truly accrue. You've been listening to the Linguaverse. I'm James Miller.